It was Friday, the 13th of October, 2023, and I was in Shoreditch, East London, just past midnight. The air had that crisp autumn edge, cool enough to sharpen your senses, even after a few drinks. I'd been out for drinks with a few workmates. Nothing wild, just a couple of pints at a pub near Old Street. We were celebrating a minor win at the office, something small but enough to give us an excuse to pretend we were more successful than we actually were. It was past midnight when I stepped outside. The streets had emptied fast. The laughter and music from earlier seemed to have vanished in an instant. I pulled my coat tight around me and checked my phone. Battery, 9%. Great. I hadn't really thought through how I was getting home. I debated walking to the tube station, but it was late and the trains were probably done for the night. That's when the idea hit: may get a cab. And as if summoned by that single thought, a taxi pulled up beside me. No joke, no app, no waving it down, just a black cab appearing out of nowhere and rolling to a perfect stop next to me like it had been waiting. It wasn't your modern Uber or a sleek silver hybrid. It was an old-school black cab, boxy, matte paint, no advertisements, no company logo. The kind you'd see in grainy documentaries about 1970s London. The only light was a dim, amber taxi sign glowing on top. I hesitated, but then again, my phone was dying and I was tired. So I opened the back door and slid in. The interior smelled faintly of smoke and old leather. The glass divider was scratched up, making the driver look distorted in the rearview mirror. He was a large man, broad shoulders, wearing a thick, dark coat. I couldn't see much of his face, just a crooked nose and eyes that seemed far too deep in their sockets. I gave him my address. He didn't speak, just gave a slow nod, and then we were off. It didn't register at first, but something about the cab felt wrong. Old cars can be charming, sure, but this felt ancient-like. I was in a memory instead of the present. Then I looked at the fare meter. It was counting down, not up, down. I blinked and leaned forward, squinting at the glowing red digits. 17.6 pounds, 16.4 pounds, 15.1 pounds. I laughed nervously and said, "Hey, I think your meter's bugged." No answer. The driver didn't react. He just kept staring forward, his hands locked on the wheel, knuckles white. I looked at the GPS screen beside the meter. Static. Just a flickering arrow spinning slowly in place, like it didn't know where we were, like we weren't on any map at all. The roads outside grew darker, quieter. We drove deeper into the city, or maybe away from it. It was hard to tell. The usual landmarks started to disappear. The buildings outside were unfamiliar, oddly shaped. Some looked like they'd been abandoned for decades. Others looked like they had never existed in the first place. And there was no one else on the road. No cars, no pedestrians, no lights. It was just us. I tried checking my phone again. Still on 9%. Still showing the time as 12:03 a.m. It hadn't moved. I tried swiping, opening apps, calling someone anything. Nothing worked. The screen wouldn't respond. It was like the phone was frozen in time. The silence was deafening. No engine noise, no radio, just the hum of tires on tarmac and my own breath. Something inside me began to twist. I tapped the divider. "Mate, are you sure you're going the right way?" Still nothing. I leaned closer. "Where are we going?" This time, he spoke. His voice was like gravel on metal. "The fare's been paid." "What?" I said, laughing nervously again. "What do you mean by that?" No answer. The buildings outside began to change. Familiar locations started popping up, but they weren't right. A newsagent I used to go to as a kid, closed down years ago, stood brightly lit on a corner. A petrol station that burned down in 2014 was suddenly alive again, fully operational. All of it looked frozen in time, unaging, preserved. Then came the voice again, low and accusing. "You lied, didn't you?" I felt my blood run cold. "What? What do you mean? You said you didn't know what happened to her." I froze. There was only one person he could be talking about. Ellie. A name I hadn't said out loud in years. I hadn't told anyone. Ever. Back in university, Ellie had been a classmate, a friend, maybe something more. We'd been at a party near the canal. We were both drinking, but I was way worse off. At some point, she went outside to get some air. I followed, but then something happened. Something I buried deep. She never came back. Police said she fell in, maybe wandered too close to the edge. No one could prove anything. No charges, just whispers. I said I didn't know what happened, but I did. And now, so did he. Panic swelled inside me. I tried the door. It wouldn't open. I pulled at the handle. Nothing. Tried the windows, wouldn't budge. Locked in. Trapped. I began to yell, to scream for help, but there was no one. Nothing but trees now. Tall, twisted, black trees lining either side of the road, bending inward like they were watching us pass, like they were closing in. That's when I saw them. Figures standing at the edge of the road. Dozens. Silent. Motionless. Their faces were blurred, their eyes hollow. Some were children. One looked like my brother. One looked like Ellie. She opened her mouth like she was about to scream, but no sound came out. I turned back to the driver, heart hammering. "Where the fuck are we?" He grinned. A grin that didn't belong on any human face. The place between the last truth and the final lie. I begged to be let out. "I want out. Let me out now." He answered. "You are." The cab slowed. Ahead was an old rusted gate. Black iron twisted into spires. No signs. No path beyond it. Just firelight flickering in the fog. I could hear it crackling somewhere far away, and something else like breathing, heavy, animalistic breathing in the mist. The meter ticked down to 0. Fare collected. The driver turned to me fully. His face was no longer human. His eyes glowed black, pupils stretching and swirling like oil. His mouth was filled with rows of needle-thin teeth, too many for one jaw. His skin was cracked like baked earth, deep lines splitting open to reveal flickering embers underneath. "This is where we drop you off." The door creaked open on its own, but I didn't move. And then I was yanked. Something unseen grabbed my legs and dragged me toward the open door. I kicked, screamed, thrashed. My nails tore at the seats, at the ceiling. I was not going out there. Not into that fog. Not into that gate. And then somehow I broke free. I threw the cab into reverse and floored it. The car lurched backward, then stalled. I restarted it, tears streaming down my face, shaking like mad. The engine roared. I turned the wheel, slammed my foot on the pedal, and drove blindly, frantically, crashing through black branches and tangled road. And then, city lights, like someone flicked a switch. Suddenly, I was back in Shoreditch, the real Shoreditch. Cars, people, the living world. I crashed the cab into a post and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop running until I got home, locked the door, and curled into the corner of my room until sunrise. I never took a taxi again. Not once. Not ever. I walk. I bike. I even bought a scooter, but no more cabs. This one still messes with my head. It started like any other quiet evening, the 17th of July, 2022, in Cedar Falls, Iowa. I had wrapped up work a bit early and was lounging in the kitchen, sipping coffee and watching the clouds shift outside the window. There was something uneasy about the sky, a heavy, grey stillness that felt unnatural. I'd been following the forecast all day, and the local station said a storm was rolling in, but I didn't expect it to hit so fast. By late afternoon, the wind had picked up. Trees outside started bending, groaning like they were being pushed by something unseen. The temperature dropped fast, and within minutes, thunder shook the walls like distant cannon fire. Rain followed in sheets, hard, sideways, angry. It slapped against the windows so violently, I backed away, half expecting the glass to shatter. I live alone, in a small one-story home with 2 bedrooms, a narrow hallway, and an attic hatch that sits directly above the back part of the hallway near the laundry room. It's one of those old pull-down types with a wooden ladder attached. Honestly, I hardly ever think about it. The attic's empty, except for some dusty insulation and boxes the previous owner left behind. Around 7 p.m., the power flickered once, twice, and then cut out completely. I wasn't surprised. The grid in this area can barely handle a stiff breeze. I had flashlights and candles ready, part of my routine. I lit a few, set them in the living room and kitchen, and settled onto the couch with my phone, hoping the signal might hold long enough to stream a podcast or check the weather updates. The house was eerily quiet, except for the rain hammering the roof and the occasional groans from the walls under pressure. I was scrolling absent-mindedly when I heard it, a dull, almost polite thud from somewhere down the hall. I paused, flashlight in hand, and listened. Nothing followed. Probably the wind, I thought, or something knocked loose. I got up to check the front door. Still locked. Back door secure. Everything as it should be. But when I turned back toward the hallway, I stopped dead in my tracks. The attic hatch was open, not just slightly ajar. The whole panel was hanging down, and the fold-out wooden ladder was fully extended to the floor. I stared, not breathing, my heart pounding in my throat. You have to yank that ladder down with a bit of force. It doesn't just fall open on its own. I hadn't touched it in years, and the house had been silent aside from the storm. No creak, no snap of hinges, nothing to explain how it had opened. And yet, there it was wide open, waiting. I walked toward it carefully, looked up into the darkness. Nothing moved. I stood beneath it, trying to remember if maybe I had checked it earlier and forgotten. But no, I knew I hadn't. I climbed up 3 steps and shined my flashlight into the attic. Just insulation, cobwebs, a couple of cardboard boxes and space. Empty, dusty space. I didn't go further. I stepped down, folded the ladder back up, and clicked it into place. Then I dragged my couch beneath it. That night, I slept in the living room with the flashlight beside me. The next morning, the storm had passed and power returned around 10 a.m. I went back to work and told myself I'd imagined it. Maybe the door wasn't latched properly. Maybe the pressure caused it to drop. I knew it was a stretch, but I didn't want to deal with the alternative. 3 days later, it happened again. Another storm hit less intense but loud enough to rattle the walls. I woke up around 2 a.m. because I thought I heard something in the house. Not banging, not crashing, just footsteps. Slow and deliberate. I got out of bed, heart pounding, and walked out to the hallway. The attic door was open again. The ladder was down, and this time, the couch was still under it. I had pushed it back 2 days ago. It hadn't moved. Something had pulled the ladder down over it. I called the cops. They showed up 20 minutes later, searched the attic, the house, the yard. No signs of forced entry, no footprints. They told me to check with my landlord and make sure no one had spare keys. I changed the locks that day. I started sleeping with the bedroom door locked and a chair shoved under the handle. I set up a motion sensor cam aimed at the attic. I didn't care if I looked paranoid. 2 nights later, another storm rolled through. Shorter this time. I stayed up and watched the camera feed from my phone. At 3:07 a.m., the attic door opened on its own. The ladder came down slowly. No person visible. Just the door opening and the ladder unfolding in a single motion. Smooth, controlled. Then the feed cut out. I sprinted into the hallway with a baseball bat. The door was open. The ladder was down, but the hallway was empty. I called the cops again. This time, they found something. Not a person, but food wrappers. In the attic. None of them were mine. Some looked recent. One of the officers said it looked like someone had been sleeping up there. That's when it hit me. I never checked the attic. Ever. Someone could have been living above me for weeks. Months. Watching. They couldn't say how long. I bought a padlock and sealed the attic door shut with a heavy chain. I didn't sleep for 2 nights straight. And then, just when I started to feel safe again, it happened one last time. Not during a storm. Not in the middle of the night. Broad daylight. I came home from work and saw the attic door wide open. The ladder was fully extended. The padlock was on the floor, snapped clean in half. I backed out of the house and called the cops one more time. They searched everything again. They brought dogs this time. They found nothing. No one was up there. No signs of recent activity. The chain I had locked it with was still intact. Untouched. I didn't understand it. The door had definitely been open. The ladder had definitely been down. I had seen it. 2 days later, I got a text from my cousin. He asked if I wanted to grab food, said he was nearby. We hadn't talked in weeks. We met up, and I told him everything. The storm, the attic door, the ladder, the motion cam, the police. I went through it all. He listened. Then he smiled. He asked if I remembered the spare key I gave him last year when I went on vacation. Said he'd been bored lately. Figured he'd mess with me. He laughed about it. Called it harmless fun. Said he even rigged the camera to shut off using an RF jammer app on his phone. He was proud of it, like it was a prank worth bragging about. I just sat there and stared at him. He admitted to sleeping up there for a night during the first storm. Said he'd even dropped the ladder while I was home just to see what I'd do. He kept smiling until I asked how he knew which night the cops came back with dogs. His smile dropped. He didn't know they'd brought dogs. He said he stopped after the camera night. After that meet-up with my cousin he admitted to the prank. I figured it was over. The attic door didn't open for a few nights. I still slept with the bat near my bed, but things calmed down. There were no more noises or motion on the camera feed. For the first time in weeks, I started to feel like things might go back to normal. Then, 5 nights later, I came home after work. The storm had rolled through that morning, but the sky had cleared up by the time I got home. I walked through the front door and stopped dead in my tracks. The attic door was open again, the ladder fully extended, resting on the hallway floor. The chain was still looped through the latch, but it had been unscrewed clean from the ceiling. That night, I didn't call the cops. I called my cousin, told him it happened again. He sounded different. He said he hadn't been near my house since the night we met. Said he deleted the RF jammer app. Said he felt weird about the say. He said the joke had gone too far. Swore up and down it wasn't him. I asked again, pressing harder, but he only swore louder. This time, he sounded serious, scared, even. He told me to change the locks again, maybe install more cameras. Said he'd help board the attic shut if that's what it took. After that night, the attic door never opened again. Weeks passed. No strange noises, no movement, no signs of anything unusual. And somehow, that silence made everything worse, because I never figured out who or what opened it that last time. The attic door doesn't fall open by itself. You have to unlatch it, pull it down with force. And I'd been home when it happened. I hadn't heard it open. That's what keeps me up now. The not knowing. People like answers. Closure. But I didn't get that. All I got was an attic that never opened again, and the lingering fear that maybe whatever was up there is just waiting. Even now, on quiet nights, I hear faint creaks above me. Not loud, just enough to make me wonder if something's still up there, and if it ever really left. Last October, my friends and I planned one final getaway before life pulled us in different directions. We were all in our mid-20s fresh out of college, balancing job offers, grad school applications, and long-distance relationships that wouldn't survive the coming months. We wanted one last weekend of peace, away from deadlines and decisions. No phones, no obligations. Just a cabin deep in the woods, near the edge of the Navajo Nation in northern Arizona. There were 5 of us. Me, Darren, the planner of the group. Naomi, my ex-turned-best friend. Joel, the loud one with a dark sense of humor. Amber, the voice of reason. And Milo, the quietest but also the most superstitious. He was born and raised in Gallup, New Mexico, close enough to the reservation that his grandmother had filled his childhood with tales of things that stalked the desert at night. He didn't like to talk about it, but whenever we mentioned ghosts or legends, he'd go quiet. The cabin was perfect isolated, rustic, and without cell service. No Wi-Fi, just pine trees, booze, firewood, and each other. The first 2 days passed like a montage. Beer pong on the back deck, bonfires with too many marshmallows, stargazing on the roof, and a ridiculous amount of card games. We laughed until our faces hurt. Every night ended the same way, half of us drunk, the rest trying to wrangle the drunk ones to bed. But on the 3rd night, the tone shifted. We'd been drinking more than usual, probably because we knew the trip was almost over. It was well past midnight when we circled around the fire pit, the flames flickering low. Someone, I think it was Joel, brought up urban legends. That led to ghost stories, which led to Milo telling us something his grandmother used to say. "Never whistle after dark," he said, his voice low, "and never walk near the tree line if you hear something calling your name." We chuckled. Amber rolled her eyes. But Milo wasn't joking. His gaze fixed on the fire, and for once, his voice didn't carry that usual sarcasm. "She said they're called skinwalkers," he continued. "They're not ghosts, they're worse. They remember faces, they mimic voices, but they're not human." Joel made some crack about Milo trying to scare us. I laughed too. But something about the way he spoke stayed with me. There was no theatrical flair to his voice, just a quiet, worn-out warning, like he didn't want to say it at all. That night, around 1 a.m., Joel dared us to walk into the woods. Just a bit, just past the pine line that marked the edge of the clearing around the cabin. "If the skinwalkers are real," he slurred, "let's give them a show." We were drunk enough to think it was a good idea. Joel took off first, charging toward the trees with his beer still in hand, shouting something we couldn't understand. His laugh echoed through the woods loud, shrill, almost frantic. The rest of us stumbled after him, calling his name and laughing. I remember tripping over a root and scraping my hand, and Naomi helped me up. We were breathless, following the sounds of Joel's voice. Branches snapped ahead. Leaves crunched. We kept chasing him. Then, silence. The forest swallowed everything. No footsteps. No laughter. Just the whisper of wind through the pines. We slowed down. Amber called out his name. No answer. Naomi joined in. Nothing. We figured Joel was messing with us, trying to spook us. It was the kind of thing he'd do. So we kept moving forward in the direction we last heard him. Our flashlights slicing through the dark. The woods stretched endlessly. The trees all looked the same. 10 minutes passed, maybe 20. The deeper we went, the harder it was to tell how far we'd come. No one admitted it out loud, but we were lost and cold and starting to panic. That's when we saw someone crouched near a fallen log up ahead. It was Joel. Same hoodie, same jeans. He didn't move, didn't speak, just crouched there like he was inspecting something on the ground. We all called his name. He slowly stood. His face was hard to see in the dark, but he turned toward us. That's when Naomi grabbed my arm and whispered, "He's chewing something." I stepped closer, squinting. His mouth was moving slow, exaggerated. His jaw jerked like he was forcing it to work. "Joel?" Amber asked. He didn't reply. He turned and bolted into the woods. We followed. Again, more from instinct than reason, but something felt off. It wasn't just the way he ran, it was how his arms flailed, how his legs moved like they weren't used to the motion, like he was figuring out the process as he went. Naomi fell behind. Amber tripped. Milo stopped entirely and refused to go further. Finally, after another few minutes of chasing, I yelled, "Forget it. Let him scare himself." We turned back. None of us spoke much during the walk. I kept glancing over my shoulder. Naomi stayed close beside me. She wouldn't stop shaking. When we got back to the cabin, the door was already open. Inside, Joel was sitting by the fireplace. His clothes were soaked through hoodie clinging to his back, jeans dripping into a puddle on the floor. He didn't acknowledge us, didn't look up. His eyes were locked on the fire, like he didn't even realize we were there. "Where'd you go?" Amber asked cautiously. No answer. Milo stepped closer, putting a hand on Joel's shoulder. Joel flinched hard, like he'd been touched by lightning. He didn't say a word, just sat there, dripping wet, staring into the embers. Eventually, we gave up and went to bed, shaken and confused. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the way he moved in the woods, how silent he'd been when we returned. The next morning, Joel was gone. We thought maybe he'd gone out to relieve himself or take a walk, but hours passed and he didn't come back. We called for him, scanned the tree line, searched the path back into the woods. Nothing. By noon, we packed up and drove 20 miles to a gas station where we had reception, called the sheriff, filed a report. 3 days later, they found a body in a shallow creek about half a mile from the cabin. It was Joel. Same clothes, same shoes. But the sheriff said he'd been dead for at least 3 days. Since around 2 a.m., the night we chased him into the woods. The same night, we saw him sitting by the fire. They ruled it accidental, claimed he slipped and hit his head trying to cross the creek, but none of us said a word. None of us told them what we'd seen. Who would have believed us? We never talked about it after. Not really. A few texts in the weeks that followed. Milo moved to Oregon and stopped answering my calls. Amber refuses to go camping anymore. Naomi and I tried to joke about it once at a bar, but we couldn't finish our drinks. Because deep down, we were all thinking the same thing. What if Joel never came out of the woods? What if the thing we chased, laughed with, followed through the dark trees, wasn't Joel at all? What if that laughter we heard echoing between the pines wasn't human but a lure, a mimic, something that needed our attention, our trust? The thing we saw crouched by the fallen log didn't speak. It didn't smile. It didn't even blink. It just stood, stared, and then ran off with that awkward, stuttering rhythm like its limbs weren't used to moving together. Like it was still figuring out how to move in that borrowed skin. And later, when we found Joel by the fire, he didn't talk, didn't even look at us. He just sat there in his soaked hoodie, eyes locked on the flames, watching, studying, learning, like we were a puzzle he was putting together piece by piece. Then he was gone by morning. When the sheriff found Joel's body 3 days later half a mile from the cabin, they said he'd died the same night we chased him into the trees, around 2 a.m. But we saw him at 2 a.m. Or, we thought we did. We never told anyone what we really saw. Who would have believed it? That something else had come out of the woods wearing our friend's skin? Sometimes, late at night, I remember the way it moved through the trees, how its joints twisted wrong, how it seemed to chew but never swallowed, like it didn't quite know how a mouth worked yet. We used to think it was mimicking Joel, but what if it wasn't pretending? What if it became him? What if it only wore his face to learn how to wear ours next? I've been driving long haul for over 12 years now, mostly scrap metal runs through the Midwest. It's not glamorous, not the kind of work that gets talked about at dinner tables or in those made-for-television movies about the open road. It's just steel, rust, grease, and silence. Endless miles of cracked pavement cutting through flatlands and forgotten towns, with nothing but the occasional flicker of a dying radio signal or a truck stop that feels 2 decades behind. I run on bad coffee, gas station burritos, and enough caffeine to jumpstart a corpse. But I don't mind it. The solitude doesn't bother me. In fact, I've come to depend on it. The hum of the engine, the rhythmic whine of the tire sit, all becomes a kind of meditation, a quiet world that makes more sense than the one waiting at the end of the hall. Most nights, it's just me, the dark, and the white lines pulling me forward like thread through a needle. But not that night. It was the 17th of October, 2022. I was halfway through a 2-day haul from Des Moines, Iowa, to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. Around 2:15 a.m., I pulled into a rest stop off US Route 54, just outside Pratt, Kansas. Not one of the big rest plazas with fast food and showers, just a lonely turnout with a gravel lot, a flickering bathroom shack, a couple vending machines, and 3 other semis spaced out like wary animals. There were maybe 2 other trucks there, parked on the opposite side. I tucked mine into a far corner spot, killed the engine, locked everything down, and climbed into the sleeper cab to catch a nap before sunrise. I remember checking the time 2:17 a.m. before shutting my eyes. The wind rustled a bit outside, rattling something plastic. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. I faded out fast. About 45 minutes later, I woke up. Not fully, just disturbed. You know that feeling when something's wrong, but you can't place it. That's what this was. I sat up slowly, trying to figure out if I'd heard something or just imagined it. The noise came from back there. I held my breath and listened. Quick, light movements. Too light for a raccoon. Too purposeful for wind. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe a chain had come loose. Maybe I was dreaming. But after 30 seconds of just sitting there, I knew I wasn't imagining it. I reached under my bunk and grabbed the tire iron, stepped out into the cold Kansas night, and walked around the back of the trailer. The latch was still locked. No sign of tampering. I gave the metal a hard bang with the iron and listened. Nothing. Just silence and the smell of diesel. I stood there for another minute, waiting. No movement. No voice. Just the wind. And somewhere far off, the low growl of a semi cruising down the highway. Telling myself I was tired and half crazy, I got back into the cab and pulled out just before dawn. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. 10 miles down, I hit a weigh station. Rolled across the scale, got the green light, and parked to double-check the load. Just a routine check. I unlocked the trailer and swung open the doors. That's when I saw them. Not people yet. Just signs. Trash. Empty chip bags. A water bottle rolled to the edge. A wrinkled, stained blanket shoved into a corner. All stuff that definitely hadn't been there during loading. I stepped inside, scanning the floor, dust and rust. Then I saw the prints. Barefoot. Small. At least 2 different sizes. Scattered across the trailer floor, like they'd been pacing, moving, hiding. I shut the doors and stood there for a second, tire iron hanging from my hand, pulse pounding hard enough to shake my vision. I didn't know what the hell to do. I didn't want to call dispatch, didn't want the hassle, didn't want to say something unless I was sure. Maybe they were gone now. Maybe it had just been a hitchhiker who jumped out at the rest stop. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew better. I got back in and kept driving. For the next hour, I kept glancing in my mirror, expecting the trailer door to pop open. My nerves were on fire. The road stretched endlessly ahead, and the sun slowly began to crawl over the plains. Birds started flying low over the fields, but none of it looked peaceful. It all felt wrong. Just after noon, I pulled into a beat-up gas station just outside a town called Pratt. One pump working, no other cars. The place looked forgotten. The attendant inside barely looked up from his magazine. I parked far from the building, grabbed the tire iron again, and opened the trailer. Nothing, just crates, shadows, dust. Then she moved. She'd been wedged between two crates, tucked so deep into the corner, I nearly missed her. Thin, pale, filthy. She looked about 15, maybe 16, wearing a faded grey hoodie that could have belonged to a linebacker. Her hair hung in greasy strands over her face, and when she looked up at me, her eyes were sunken and wary. She didn't flinch, didn't scream, just stood slowly, arms hugging her sides, trembling. "Don't call the cops," she whispered. I stared at her, not sure if I'd heard right. "I just needed to get away," she said. Didn't care where to. Her voice was hoarse, like she hadn't spoken in days. Her name was Sadie. That's all she gave me. She wouldn't say where she came from, wouldn't say who she was running from, but she kept glancing behind her, back toward the far end of the trailer. I asked her, "Are you alone?" She shook her head. "There's someone else in here," she said. Her voice dropped to a hush. "He climbed in the night before last. I don't know his name. He doesn't talk. Just watches me." I felt my skin crawl. "Does he know you're in here too?" She nodded. "He hasn't moved. Not once. Just sits there." I stepped forward, trying to look around the crates. Sadie grabbed my arm, hard, way stronger than I expected for someone who looked half dead. Her nails dug into my sleeve. "Don't," she said. "Please." I hesitated. I didn't know if he was asleep, unconscious, or faking. Didn't know if he had a weapon. All I knew was Sadie wasn't moving. She wasn't coming out unless I left him in there. Her eyes never left that dark corner. That told me all I needed to know. I backed out, closed the trailer, locked it. I used the payphone and called the police, told them my location, my truck's plate, and everything Sadie had told me. They told me to stay put. They arrived in less than 10 minutes. Sadie came out first, slowly, like she didn't believe she was really leaving. She didn't speak, didn't even look at the officers, just walked with them like someone sleepwalking through a nightmare. Then they looked behind the crates. He was there. He was slumped in the corner, shirtless, emaciated, skin grey like old ash, eyes wide open but vacant. Scratches ran down his arms and neck, like he'd been clawing at himself in the dark. They found a used needle behind one of the crates, a torn plastic bag stuffed into his sock. No ID, no phone, just a battered little notebook filled with strange symbols, shapes I didn't recognize, and names scribbled over and over. Sadie's wasn't in there. Toxicology came back a few days later. Fentanyl. Enough to kill him quickly. They guessed he took it sometime during the night, while Sadie was still back there, just feet away, breathing the same air, sitting beside a man who hadn't died yet, but would. She never said whether she saw him go. Maybe she closed her eyes. Maybe she didn't. The cops asked if I knew how they got in. I didn't. They said I did the right thing, told me not to worry, but I do. I still think about Sadie quiet rest stops, the creak of the trailer. Not for what she said, but what she didn't. She never asked for help, never looked scared, just resigned. I don't know where she went. I just hope it's somewhere safer. Now, I double-check the trailer on every route. I make sure it's empty, because that night still haunts me, and I haven't slept right since. If you enjoyed the video, let us know your favorite story in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the channel with others. Until next time, Stay spooky, stay haunted.